Hey everyone. So for today, I will be discussing about factorial research design and how to eyeball for main effect and interaction. So before that, ano nga ba ang factorial research design? So pag sinabi nating factorial research design, ito yung mga research studies wherein you are testing whether or not may effect nga ba yung dalawang independent variables. So again, dalawang independent variables sa isang dependent variable. So yan ang tinatawag nating factorial research design. So considering that an experiment should have control of conditions dun sa isang independent variable na identify natin, okay lang na kahit categorical, meaning quasi-experimental variable yung isang variable. So, pwedeng gender and so forth. So, you must also identify which or what levels of independent variable you are going to do or impose sa iyong mga participants. So ano nga ba ang benefits of conducting a factorial research design? So kung babalikan natin yung chapter 3 ni Mears and Hansen, no? So may discussion siya doon on what internal validity and external validity are about. So basically again, balikan natin yung chapter 3 ni Mears and Hansen, no? An internal validity is the degree or the extent through which we can make causal statements. So, meaning to say, the levels of the independent variable precedes the manifestation of the dependent variable or yung mga behavior or yung behavior na na-measure natin to be exact, no? Pero yung external validity naman, it is the extent through which our findings can be generalized. So meaning to say, pwedeng applicable sa labas ng experimental laboratory. And factorial research design actually gives us a big picture of how the independent variables that we have identified plays a role on the dependent variable. So the best analogy that we can give here, no, especially if you are a coffee drinker, just like me, instant coffee analogy. Because sa instant coffee, 3 in 1, kumbaga. Bakit naging 3 in 1 ang factorial study? Well, especially if you have two independent variables, first, you have to identify the main effect ni IV1. Also, you also have to identify main effect for IV2 and whether or not there is an interaction between independent variable 1 and independent variable 2. So we can test simultaneously for the effects of our two independent variables, then we can test as to whether or not may interaction between the two independent variables. So meaning to say, independent variable 1, so or the levels identified in independent variable 1 has yielded significant differences on the behavior or the dependent variable. Next, the levels of independent variable 2 or the varying levels of independent variable 2 yield or produce changes in the identified dependent variable. And lastly, whether or not independent variable 1 or independent variable 2 or the levels of both independent variables played an influence to the level of another independent variable or both. So meaning to say, yung isang level ng independent variable na apektuhan yung another level nung another independent variable in producing changes in the behavior. So now I will be teaching you on how we can detect for main effect and an interaction through eyeballing. So word of caution lang, we are not using statistics here, no, because it is preferred actually to make use of statistics. Instead, I will only be presenting how you can detect an interaction through eyeballing. So for example, guys, I would like to study the effect of gender and frequently used social networking application or site on the ability of the participants to detect fake news. Okay, so here again, we have gender. So gender is only either male or female. On the other hand, social networking site, ang gamitin nating example will be Facebook or X, formerly known as Twitter. So imagine that our data here, we have 6 and 6 and 2 and 10. Ayan. So yan kunwari yung mga averages, no? Males that use FB have an average or identified an average of 6 fake news in the experimental task and so forth. So first you have to detect for or check, no, for the main effect. So does gender have main effect? So to check for the main effect of gender, you have to identify first the average of the averages. So 6 plus 2 equals 8 divided by 2. The mean for males is 4. Then 6 plus 10, 16 divided by 2 is 8. So is there a main effect for gender? So most likely, yes, considering that there is a significant difference between the average values of how much fake news they have properly identified. Wherein females were able to identify more fake news compared to the male participants in the study. So now let's check for whether or not the social networking sites has a main effect. So 6 plus 6, 12 divided by 2 is equals to 6. Next, 2 plus 10 divided by 2 is 6. So is there a main effect for social networking site? So given that there is no difference in our data, we can say that there is no main effect for the social networking site being used by the participants. So now let's determine whether or not there is an interaction between gender and the social networking site used in helping our participants properly identify fake news. So basically, if you are going to look through the data, so Facebook did not yield any significant difference compared to those who are using Twitter or X. And it is evident here that there is an interaction because X influence both female and male participants. So if a male participant is using Twitter or X, mas konti yung na-identify nilang fake news compared to the female participants na mas marami yung na-identify nilang fake news. So ulitin ko. If the participant uses X or Twitter and male yung participant, no? So mas konti yung na-identify na fake news among male participants na gumagamit ng X compared doon sa female participants na gumagamit ng X kasi mas nahigitan nung female participants na gumagamit ng X or Twitter. Okay? So if we are going to plot it using a line graph, ayan, so we can use another color. So example would be male. Ayan. So sa males or sa FB, no? Or Facebook rather, nasa 6 lang. So blue stands for FB, while ang X, let's use green. So here, 2 and N. No? But just a word of caution, please bear in mind that just because the lines intersect doesn't mean that there is indeed a significant interaction. So you have to look through the data again and see the bigger picture sa kung paano na-influensyahan nung isang level nung independent variable yung another independent variable. So again, in the earlier example, X was able to influence both female and male participants because the male participants na nakuha sa test na ito or sa experiment na to rather, no? Mas konti yung na-identify nilang fake news compared dun sa female users of X na nag-participate dun sa study. So, may influence yung social networking site dun sa gender of user in helping identify fake news. Okay? So now let's try another example. So imagine that we have the same study, no? But our data is males who uses Facebook identified an average of 3 fake news, while the males who were using X or Twitter identified 5 fake news. Then females who were using Facebook identified 8 fake news on average, while female participants whom were using X or Twitter identified an average of 10 fake news. Okay, so balik tayo sa ginawa natin kanina. So we would like to determine whether or not may mean effect muna, no? So 3 plus 8 is 11 divided by 2. We have 5.5. 10 plus 5 divided by 2, we have 7.5. So we can say, given the fact that there is a difference, we can say that social networking site in this example has a main effect in identifying fake news. So now let's determine whether or not there is a sex or gender difference, no? So 3 plus 5, 8 divided by 2, we have 4. And 8 plus 10 divided by 2, we have 9. So meron na naman din na main effect between male and female participants. So now let's check for the interaction, no? So imagine that here, so we have, let's use color blue again for FB. So we have here for male and female, we have here 1, 2, 3, and female 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, Ayan. And this is x, 5, and 10. So as you can see here, the lines appear to be parallel. Pero sorry na lang sa aking drawing, no? So pag sinabi nating parallel yung nalabas na line, it means that the unit change is constant. So as you can see in this example, the difference between male and female participants using Facebook on average has a constant of positive 5. And ganun din dito sa X, a constant of plus 5. So there was a change in both directions in 5 units. So therefore, if you plot something and see a parallel line similar to this, ang ibig sabihin nun, walang interaction. Okay? So there is a main effect for the social networking sites used in identifying fake news, and there is also a main effect for gender in identifying fake news, but there is no interaction between social networking site and gender in identifying fake news based on this example. So I hope everything is clear now. So again, let's wrap up our discussion. So even though it is commonly believed that an interaction is evident when lines intersect one another, it cannot be generalized. Instead, it is best that you look through the data itself and see how one level of the independent variable influences the data itself. And also, if you plot your data and you have observed a parallel line, it means that there is no interaction. So I hope you were able to get it. And that's it for this lecture.